Now, Wendy said about my new book. Well, it is this one. It's been out 10 months now, Experiences of Physical Phenomena in the 21st Century. And as you said, it's 30 years this spring since I started sitting. When I met Tom Harrison in September 93, I was absolutely fascinated to hear his talk about his mother. We became friends very, very quickly, and I offered to drive him whenever he wanted to do his talks because by then he was 75 and he just said, I can't do it. I can't drive that far. I can't drive as far as Scotland. I said, well, look, I'll do the driving. If you come to me in Yorkshire, then we can go and we can do the rest. Well, we did, and all the talks seemed to be in the north of England for 2 or 3 years. And then we started to go down to the south and on. We didn't stop traveling for about 6 years until we went to live in Spain. But just 4 months after meeting Tom and getting to know him, he got me an invitation to go and sit in Stuart Alexander's circle. And this was what really set everything off because the first night I sat there, this is in the January of 94, the guide said, Whitefeather greets little sister. Whitefeather knows a lot about you. There is nothing to fear. We come in love to serve. What an introduction to a circle and to it, well, as it turned out, a way of life, because we could only sit for that first year, for 94, whenever Tom came north to be with me and for us to go and do talks, were we able to go and sit with Stuart. But at the beginning of 95, then I was allowed to sit without him being there, and I was accepted as part of the circle. And we remained part of that circle for 6 years until we left and went to Spain. And it was just mind-blowing because they tried all sorts of things. It was at a time when Stuart's circle was really just starting to get going. Walter Stinson had really got his foot in the door. He'd really started to... He'd been very quiet. He had to learn to speak through Stuart. And because although they hadn't at that stage got direct voice, they spoke through Stuart, who was in deep trance. And learning to cope with Stuart's vocal cords and his voice, it was quite a challenge. And he did say to Tom one night, if you had come 2 years ago, you would hear me hardly able to utter a word. But I think I'm getting there. Well, he used to give us long talks, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, on what life was like, how their bodies were. Michael, Stuart's brother, was a great one at asking questions. And in fact, they were just starting to work on the actual physical phenomenon, not just trans voices. And the second time I sat, was in the February, just a month after the first one. And on that evening, he said to Denise, who was Ray and June, Ray's Lister is the leader of the circle, and his wife, and it was in their house that this circle was held. And their daughter Denise was there as well. And Walter said, Denise, would you like to feel the hand of a man who's been dead for 80 years? Oh, she said, yes. And he then said, Anne, after Denise, would you like to feel the hand? Oh, yes, Walter, please. We had to change chairs and go and sit beside Stuart and take hold of his left hand. Now, at that stage, Stuart was strapped to his chair with ropes, not the cable ties later, but with ropes tightly knotted. So his left hand couldn't move. So you put your hand out in the red light, and then the light was turned off. And sure enough, over the top of my hand, within a very short time, came a very large hand. Soft, gentle, but solid. And as he moved away, moved his hand away from me, he then tapped the back of my hand, which is say, look, this is how solid I am. That was the start of it. Later that evening, we also saw the hand against the plaque, because they had an illuminated plaque, a luminous plaque. And when he put his hand against it, it was a large hand, larger than slightly, we would say, normal hand. And it has always remained the same. It is quite a large hand. And not abnormally large, but obviously bigger than Stuart's hand and anybody else in the room. The plaque was moved around the room, so we were able to see it. And that was the start of the phenomena. From there on, it moved on, and it moved fairly quickly. We were able to see hands against a table. Now, it took a year or so before we had a table with a red light underneath it, and underneath the top. And Tom and I had quite a bit of joinery to do to convert the coffee table by turning the top over, because underneath it was like a well, but there was a glass on the top surface. So we turned it over, put the glass back on. It was covered with a red cloth so that the red light could shine through. And at this stage, they were then able to make ectoplasm, and it would show us a blob dark against the dim red light. And on into that blob, you would see a hand start to form as it pushed in, and you could see the fingers, the thumb, as it moved and moved across. And of course, one of the things that he loved to do was to get people to be touched by this hand. And so you were invited to go and sit across the table and to put your right hand on the table, and then his hand would gradually move towards you until he could come and touch your hand and tap it very often, just to show how solid he was and he was there. When he did it with me, his hand approached my fingertips until we were fingertip to fingertip on the table. And he said, Anne, I want you to move your hand very slowly over the top of mine. I said, on top, Walter? Yes, on top. And so I lifted my hand slightly and gradually smoothed it up across his fingers onto the back of the hand. And I could feel the tendons in the back of the hand. I could feel the hair on the back of his hand. It was so fine and so detailed and so strong. And with that, he said, move your hand to the side. And I moved to the side, and with that, his hand grabbed mine and lifted it. And he kissed it. That was quite something. It hadn't been done before, that I had actually touched him and not the other way around. And that happens so often. But he said, just a moment, we haven't finished yet. Move your chair so that you are nearer, opposite Stuart, because I was sitting at a slight angle. Move it so you are sitting square to Stuart. So I did, moved across and put my hand back on the table as instructed. And this time, the ectoplasm as it came across was a larger amount. And into it was not one hand, but two. And it approached my hand, and it lifted it, and lifted it into the air. And then one hand went over the top, and he tapped it. Then as it moved away, he kissed it. But in the red light, on this particular occasion, we could see in the dimness above my hands was the shape of a head and the neck. And I just trying to say this, it was there. I can see her head. And June, who was sitting across at the side of Stuart, said, "There's a head and there's shoulders. I can see the shoulders." So it materialized quite a lot more of his body for him to be able to kiss my hand. And in that red light that night, very dim red light, but enough to show that that was there. And that was just one of the wonderful, wonderful experiences that I had. Another one, this is very different, was when he did the matter through matter. And we always thought that was something to do with ectoplasm, but apparently it isn't. It needs quite a different energy. And not many, I understand, not many physical mediums have this energy. But it's where the body of the medium becomes so sensitized that he's neither in the physical world, but certainly not in the spirit world, but between the two, so that they can actually pass physical objects through his flesh. And this is how they're able to lift the hand. So a sitter goes and sits beside him, again, taking hold of Stuart's left hand, strapped down by now with plastic, very thick plastic ties. And I said, right, you've checked that the tie is there, the light is put out, and you sit holding it. And before you know where you are, your arm is up in the air with her still holding his hand, completely free of the cable tie. Walter then asked me to feel with my right hand the arm of the chair. Is the band still there? Yes, it is. Yes, pull it, pull it. Let everybody hear that you can hear it. Right, it was. His arm came back down onto the chair. Anne, feel his arm. Is the band there? Yes, it was. Move your right hand away. And with that, our arms were up in the air again. Will you feel the arm of the chair? Is the band there? No, it isn't. Feel right to the very back. Now, the chair that Stuart sits in has the arm of the chair secured downwards to the seat and also into the back of the chair. So there's no way that the band could slide off. But it was not there anywhere along that arm. Put my hand back, and down came our arms and rested. And he said, now, is the band round Stuart's arm? Feel his wrist, very gently. And I felt it. No, it's not there. Are you sure? It's not there. And with that, on the back of my hand, I could feel a large hand, and under it was a closed cable tie, the one that had been on the chair. And as I felt it there on the back of my hand, it was around my wrist, tight around my wrist, just as it had been on Stuart's. So it was round there, and with that, it had passed through it. I could still feel the sensation of it doing that. I couldn't believe what was happening. I had to feel it back onto Stuart's hand. And as I felt it, it wasn't on his arm at all. As my fingers rested on his wrist, I felt the band come back through my fingertips around his left arm. I've never let go with his right arm. I'd never let go with my left hand. I'd never let go of Stuart at this time, but that band was there. It then disappeared off completely and was given to me as a memento. I still have that safe in my box. Anybody could fasten a cable tie and say, this is what happened. But I know that cable tie did that. There was no sign of breakage. There was no sign of cutting. It is just complete as it was on. They don't do it in such detail now with many people. They've moved on and they take it off Stuart and the arms go up and come down and then the light is put on to show that the band is still around the arm. It must have taken a huge amount of energy, but it was a special one. And it was only 2 years ago or 3 years ago when I was doing almost 3 years ago now, when I was doing Katie's book, Touching the Next Horizon, that Leslie Kean, the American journalist, had asked about this matter through matter. And he said, well, when we do it with the medium, they're in a special sensitive state. And when the sitter is holding the hand, they are neither between physical nor spirit. They're an in-between stage. So in other words, I was no longer solid while I was holding Stuart's hand. That my arm was again between the two states. Just to know that, but I think I did know, and I did. In fact, when I was writing the book and put this in, I actually listened to the tape again from all those years ago, 97, I think it was. I listened to it just to make sure that that is what was happening. That is what I said. And I said, it's gone through. It's gone through. So I know I haven't made it up since. I did feel that sensation of the band passing through my arm. So it's quite amazing. And those are just two of the wonderful things that happened. But from working with ectoplasm and seeing ectoplasm and feeling ectoplasm, there's also other stages, the other parts of physical phenomena that there is. And one of the most amazing ones is direct voice, sometimes known as independent direct voice, where they make a voice box separate from the medium. It can be low, it can be high, but eventually they take the ectoplasm and build a voice box out of it. The first time this happened was when we had a friend of the circle who was desperate to sing, but he lived at the other end of the country, had actually sent us a karaoke machine. And he said, look, if you can do that and you can get Walter to replicate what he did in the 1920s with his sister, Minna, Marjorie the Medium, she was called, by the press and the writers. If you can get him to speak into a sealed box, into a microphone, it can then be recorded and played back through the karaoke machine. Well, Walter absolutely refused. He said, I am not going back those 70 years and doing those experiments again. I want to move on and do new things. Well, he said, well, we've got this machine. Well, he eventually agreed that we could put a microphone inside a box, but the box had to have a small opening in the front so that they could more easily pass the energy into the box and to the microphone. And this one particular night when we had it all set up, we actually had somebody came and they said that they had made a voice box inside the box because it was just a cardboard box about this size. And we'd left a slight gap down the front. So they were able to get into it, but you couldn't get a hand in it and you certainly couldn't get at the microphone. But they'd made a voice box inside the box against the microphone. And they said this is what they were hoping to do. They were trying to do. And they spoke quietly into the microphone for several minutes, saying this was a step forward. and they were hoping to improve on it. After a few minutes, we heard not a sound, but a sort of a different voice, a higher pitch than a Belcon, saying, "Darling, darling, can you hear?" And with that, we heard tap, 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 tap. "Can you hear? Did you hear? Did you understand?" Ray just said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand Morse code." And I said, "Are you trying to tap out a tune?" "Yes. Did you understand?" I said, "Yes, I did. I just called to say I love you." "Yes, yes." It was my husband, Norman, and that was our song. There's a lovely story that goes with it as to how it became our song. But this rhythm, he was able to tap it out, and that was his message he was sending to me. But just to be able to do that, from there onwards, the direct voice developed. But we had to abandon the karaoke machine, and they then started making the voice box out in the room. And it was probably about another 5 years before we actually sat and heard. By then, they already had Dr. Barnett starting to come and to speak out in the room. But this particular night, when we came back on a holiday from Spain, we were sitting with Stuart, and I heard down almost at knee level, because that night Gaynor, who always sat next to Stuart, was away. And so they said, would I sit next to him? So I was sitting to the left side of Stuart. And down about my knee level, I heard a voice. And this voice said that they really were pushing. This was the way they wanted to go, that they wanted to make more of the voice coming through separate from Stuart. Well, nowhere could Stuart have bent down and got that low without me knowing. But this was it, and it was quite a different voice. And then after a minute or two, it paused and said, "Mr. Harrison, I want you to pass on a message." Now, it's important, this one, so I'm going to read it to you. "I wonder, Mr. Harrison, if you would very kindly do something for me personally." "Yes, certainly, whatever." "I wonder if you would very kindly pass my regards, my friendship, and my love to Mr. Ray Smith. Oh, I heard you speaking concerning him earlier this evening, and I have to tell you I would not have missed this opportunity to convey my presence to him. You see, this is the only way in which independently I will have for a considerable period of time to reach him. If you would just do that for me." "Well, I will. I will be most grateful." And Tom said, could we ask? Unfortunately, as much as I would like to be able to do it, it is often the fact that in spite of all..." "Come on, keep going. Come on, finish what you wanted to say. We'll be speaking to him very soon. Yes, please pass on my regards and my affection." "Of course. You know, Mr. Harrison, perfectly well who it is who's addressing you here this evening." "Yes," I said, "we do. God bless." It was Oliver Lodge. Ray Smith was a wonderful trance medium who lived down near Gibraltar. And we had got to know him quite well and been down and helped him with when he had visitors, when he had mediums coming or doing sittings. And we had invited him to come to our house to meet up with Angela McInnes, who was able to go and be a medium for him down in Gibraltar. So he was coming to stay with us. When we told him, we played him the recording, he said, "Oh gosh, I've got to go." Well, 4 months later, in the August, he journeyed to Hull with June, his wife, so that they could sit with Stuart. And that night was the most amazing night, because by then the materialization in the dark had started, had really advanced quite a lot. And he was able to, Oliver was able to speak to Ray, and then we heard him advance across the room. Now, Ray was sitting probably about 8 feet from Stuart. We could hear him coming, and the voice moved across with him and spoke to Ray. He then, a hand took Ray's hand and shook it and spoke to him quite a while. And then he moved to June, sitting next to her, Ray, and he actually played with her hair, his fingers going through her hair. And she said afterwards, what he did was he wasn't just tapping my head, but he did his fingers in the order of a 5-finger exercise. Now, June was a diploma-holding pianist and knew exactly what a 5-finger exercise was, as Oliver did. And she said afterwards that was one of the problems that he had set in the envelopes that he'd left behind, was it was to do the 5-finger exercise. So they knew without a doubt that it was their friend. And Ray said that the voice was the voice he was so used to hear coming through him when he was in trance. He would sometimes hear the voice within himself. So direct voice is absolutely amazing. We've heard many, many times of different examples of it. But sitting with Stuart, we had all these wonderful nights, got to know this lovely team of people. Frida Johnson, who'd been a school teacher on Earth, and she'd actually given her address. And one night, when I wasn't there, but Michael told us that one night somebody who was sitting there said, that lady who spoke, was that Frida Johnson? Because she was my teacher and the voice is just the same. What proof can you have? When somebody who remembered her from when she was a child, to then have the spirit come back and had worked and worked at her voice, that she could be recognized. And she found it very difficult because speaking, as she said, when she was speaking through Stuart in trance, through his trance delivery, that working with a male organism was very, very difficult. She had to get the pitch right and the tone right, and it took her a long time before she was satisfied with it. But that's just one medium that we're sat with, because at the same time as we were sitting with Stuart in the early days, we got to know two of his sitters, Janet and Peter Poppleton, and they sat with Stuart. But as the team said, they always intended that Janet, who was a wonderful medium, should have a circle of her own. And they invited Janet's daughter, Angela, invited us to go and join their circle. Would we go and give them advice and be part of their circle? Well, we did. For 3 years, we sat with them. And it was a wonderful experience, because when we sat with them, we had to sit in they hadn't sort of separate rooms. The downstairs room was just an L-shaped lounge and dining area. And as you came in from the kitchen, we walked into the dining area, which was the smaller of the parts of the two. Well, by putting a curtain across the end, we were able to make quite a good séance room. But the only problem was a 5-foot dining table, 5 foot long, and it weighed about 60, 70 pounds? So I think it was about just over 5 stone. We balanced it on the bathroom scales one night to find out how much it weighed. And that table was quite amazing, because very soon it started to wriggle, and it could wriggle, and we were sitting just with our hands very lightly touching it, and you could feel the vibration in it. And as it started to wriggle, we then said, "Is there somebody there?" And it was wriggle. And if the answer was no, it was absolutely still. But if it was yes, then it would move. And it started to move more and more. And in the end, we realized that it was trying to spell. So we had to say, well, okay, just tip or wriggle when you want the letters. Well, it got very laborious to work out how many letters it had counted. So I said, well, Anne, you're at the end. You be the alphabet lady. So I had to say, right, before M, after M, and it would twitch as to which it was. And then I would start saying the letters. And when I got to the letter it was intended, it would give a twitch. So then you say, right, I've got that letter. Well, we learned all the children's names. There were 12 children who played with us, who came and moved the table and twitched and twitched and twitched. And then just afterwards, they said, well, instead of moving the table, we had on the table, we had various things. Now, I'm going to try and just show you one, because at the end of the 1 year, they said, take the table out. But before then, we'd had it dancing. I must tell you this, because it could actually dance the can-can. We had a team of music hall people who played with us as well, who came and danced, and we sang all the old songs, the World War II songs, music hall songs, not a few of the modern ones for children, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? But otherwise, it was upbeat ones. I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside, and I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, and the table would dance and move to it. And then Tom said, well, the way it was moving, he said, are you trying to do the can-can? And it's yes, a quick, violent movement. So he said, oh, okay. And he started to sing, and it absolutely stopped dead. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, what was that? And then the table would go 1, 2, 3. Quite vigorous movements. I know, I was sitting at the end and my hands were doing this under the table. And he said, right, and it had to be counted 1, 2, 3. Da 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 da. And we used to do the can-can, and that was one of their party pieces. They absolutely loved it. We had a wonderful time. And of course, the energy that we had was wonderful. But when they asked us to take the table out so that we were able to have more space, because they wanted to be able to walk around. And we said, oh, right, what are we going to do? Because we like to have a notepad and our bells and things in the centre as well. So we were allowed to have a small stool to put the bits on. Well, one of the nights, we decided before we took the table out, it was bright sunlight, middle of the summer. Before we took the table out, we said, well, let's reconstruct how we started to sit. And this is what we did. This is the table. This is how we used to sit, the 5 of us sitting around the table. We can see bright sunny afternoon, midsummer. We had such a job blacking out, but this was it. We sat there, and you can see we're laughing, because as we sat, to show how it was how we sat for that first year and what happened with the table started to wriggle, and it was vibrating and wriggling under our hands. You can see there's a wooden spoon, there's a rattle, there are temple bells, and there's my little bell at the end there, and my little bell is here. Still got that one. And it continued to wriggle and jiggle about. And this is what happened. In broad daylight, it did what it did in darkness. It wriggled and wriggled and wriggled. And as you can see it's still moving, because you can see Angela's hands are quite sharp and Peter's very sharp, but the bells are blurred and the spoon is blurred because it was still wriggling and moving, and in the movements it wriggled all the bells across because we had a chalk line down the centre of the table where we put everything to start with, just to find out how much things moved. Now, my little bell never moved. It wasn't glued down, it wasn't anchored, but it just stayed still. And the others had all shifted from this centre line across the table. Well, we were in hysterics. We didn't need darkness. And, as we know, you don't need darkness for table movement. But this is what was happening. And when we'd done that, we then took the table out and be able to sit and have normal sitting. Now, one evening when we were doing this, in fact, I think it was the same evening, where we sat with the table, there were just the 5 chairs. But when we'd taken it out, we decided we could have a couple of other chairs so that if we had visitors came to sit with us, or if spirit visitors wanted to come and sit down, we'd have extra chairs. Well, one evening, Angela said, when knew somebody was walking around, they said, well, take a seat, why don't you? When we put the lights on, they literally had. They'd taken the chair and put it in the middle of the circle, moved the stool that was here in the centre across, and put the chair right in front of Angela. They had literally taken a seat. This is how it was before we started. When we did a mock-up to say, well, this is how it was when we started, our 2 empty chairs. That was my chair at the end there. And this is what it was like. So they'd move the little stool across towards Peter in the cabinet, and then move the chair. Another night, so we had a lot of telekinesis, a lot of disturbance. This one night, when we pulled the curtain back from the cabinet, we found the drawers had been opened on the bureau. Don't know where the carrier bag had come from. I think it was further across in the lounge part. And the greyhound had been on the glass cabinet on the other side of the circle behind Angela. So we didn't know that had moved. It had been moved right across the room and onto the floor. We had so much activity. But then going on from there, we also had party nights. One night, during the circle, one of the little girls said she wanted a party. And this is by this time, we actually had direct voice, because Janet's mediumship had just developed at an amazing rate, and we had voices in the air. And Jenny, one of the little girls, said, I want a party. So we said, okay, we'll have a party after the circle. Well, do you want the table? Yes. And so when we put the dining table back in its place, and this is the lounge area. And this night, Tom had taken his video camera because he'd been making the DVD, which no doubt a lot of you have seen on the YouTube. And he'd said, well, we can do this, so we can actually film some various bits and pieces. And this is just part of a piece that was 13 minutes long. But this is, and I hope I've done share sound. This is.
Here I go on my way. Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye. We'll mention nothing dear, make it gay. Give me a smile I can keep for a while in my heart while I'm away. Till we meet once again, you and I. Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye. Oh, no, I don't think we've done yet. And down again, and And when they were up, they were up. And when they were down, they were down. And when they were only halfway up, they were neither up nor down.
That's good, friends.
That's great. Can you lift it back up again now? Please, can you?
Come on then.
Come on, Bobby.
I can go further still.
Yes.
Further still, we're going to slide.
Come on then.
Didn't touch the floor.
Come on.
Good one. Come on then.
Come on.
That's good.
Oh, he's going to touch the floor now.
All the way down.
Look at that.
Come
Oh,
on,
That's
come on then.
Come on
That's
then.
it.
That's
Come on.
it.
Come on,
Great.
Come on then.
Come on.
Yeah.
Notice how
Well
light
done.
our
friends.
fingers are.
That's it. Good one.
That's good. You're on camera.
Balance.
You're on camera now.
Candid camera.
There we are.
You've been framed. Oh, look how
Controlled.
controlled, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely
Oh,
controlled.
Yes, sit up
Oh,
again.
you
Yes.
pretty bang bang, chitty bang bang, we love you. And our pretty bang bang, chitty bang bang loves us too. We are in a motor car, what a time we'll spend. Bang bang, chitty bang bang, our five-offended friend. Bang bang, chitty bang bang, our five-offended friend.
You're more than a motor car. You're more.
Let's make you love to use every night you're machine. Oh, you pretty bang bang, chitty bang bang, we love you. And our pretty bang bang, chitty bang bang loves us too. Near, far, in one's car, what a time we'll spend. Bang bang, chitty bang bang, our five-offended friend. Bang bang, chitty bang bang, our five-offended friend. I'm Henry the Eighth, I am. Henry the Eighth, I am.
That was just a short piece of the whole thing. But I thought you'd love to see the piece where the table goes so far over that it should have fallen. It should have collapsed, but they had it absolutely under control. That is just part, just a snippet. But as we say, we moved on to having direct voice, having to feel them walking around in front of us, to feel that in the darkness, something past your legs. I remember one evening saying, "Oh, it feels as though a large dog has walked past me." And a voice behind me said, "My robes." The guide, Janet's main guide, was Grey Wolf. And it was like having a large wolf past me. But I often had him speaking behind me. If I was sitting next to Janet, he would be at the side of me. In fact, the spare chair between Janet and myself, because later on, Janet and Angela swapped places, and Janet was sitting beside me. And where we had a chair there, he said, "Take the chair away, I need space." So it was showing how solid he was standing beside me. And in fact, later on, Janet and Peter came to sit at our house when we had our circle at Brayton. We were only a few miles away from Pontefract. And one night they wanted to do something. And Tom was sitting in the cabinet. Janet was beside me, as she often was when we were sitting. And Peter was the other side of me. And there were just the four of us. And I felt a poke on my back, on my shoulder, and then a tap on the light. Tap, 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 tap. And I said, "It's strange, somebody's tapping the light. It's as though we don't put the light on now, not when Janet's gone into trance, not at this stage of the sitting." No, tap, 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 poke, poke, poke on my shoulder again, tap, tap, tap again. I said, "They've done it again." And with that, I heard, "Anne, light." This deep voice right behind my ear. So Grey Wolf was, "Oh, sorry, Grey Wolf." We turned the light on to see Janet beside me, hunched, deformed, crippled, and in a very strange position. And we realized that somebody had drawn very close to her, and that we were actually expected to do a rescue. We had to sit and think and concentrate on Janet, on this person that was with her, and talk and persuade him, right, you're all right, you're okay, you're safe. Can you see that bright light? Can you see that lady coming towards you? She's coming to help you. She's coming to be with you. And we talked and talked and talked until finally Janet relaxed and the deformity went and she just sat back in her chair. And whoever it was had gone. It was safe now, had gone, been taken into the spirit world. The following week, they actually told us that this lady was deaf, blind, mute. Not only was she crippled, but she had no senses, and she didn't know what had happened. And she just knew she was here. She didn't even realize she was dead. She was still here on earth. But they'd managed her, with our help, they had managed to get her safely into spirit. It's a very great honor to be able to do something like that. And some people say, oh no, everybody's safe, everybody goes. No, doesn't seem like it. There are some who don't know anything, who have no idea what's happening. So that was just wonderful. But that's how solid he was, that he could poke my shoulder. Our time in Spain, we had wonderful times sitting with other mediums. And just one I will mention before I finish was one Christmas. For our first Christmas, we were there actually. And we had been asked to be part of a new circle for a lady who'd just come to live in Spain. And she didn't stay for very long because she found that the heat in the summers were too much for her, and she came back. But she could have been a good physical medium, but her health was not strong. While we were sitting in this small room at her friend's house, we were singing Christmas carols under the instruction of the medium's young guide, saying, it's Christmas time, we sing carols. And as we were singing bit, and then she said, Mr. Tom, your little girl is here. So Tom said, oh yes, she's here. Sing more. And then she said, we said, right, well, we sang Good King Wenceslas. So we're sitting, singing Good King Wenceslas. And then Tom suddenly said, oh, something's hurt my foot. Now, Tom always took his shoes off when he was sitting. They were under his chair. But he was sitting with just stocking feet. And something had hit his foot. When we put the light on, Jenny said, not Jenny, Poppy said, first of all, what do you get when you sing carols? Tom said, well, I don't know. He said, you get money. At the end of the circle, when we put the light on, there on the floor, by Tom's foot, was this tiny coin. Now, it is very tiny. And we said, well, that's unusual. It's an apport. It certainly was. And the medium said, just a minute. She said, have a look at the date on it. And Tom picked it up and he found that it was a Malaysian coin. That's strange, he said. That's strange. But the date on it is 1981. She said, does that mean anything to you? Asked the medium. Yes, Tom said, it does. That was the year my granddaughter died. She was just 10 years old. She said, look again at the coin. And the coin itself is a 10-sen piece. Susan was 10 when she died under anaesthetic in a hospital in South Africa. She was just 10 years old in 1981. That was from her. The little guide had told us that Tom's little girl was there, his only granddaughter at that stage. Very, very special. As I say, we didn't sit for long with that medium because she had to return to England. But we were able to sit with another medium, Robert McLernan, who would love to have had lots of physical things happening, would love to have had the trumpet moving with trumpet voices. But no, his forte was transfiguration. And we had the most amazing series of transfiguration. Especially celebrities, because as they said, there's not a lot of use in just dad coming through or auntie coming through, and just one person can recognize them. But if everybody can recognize this somebody, then we know we are succeeding. And so we had people like Frankie Howard was the first one, Robert Morley, various other ones. And they were so clear on a mask that was built in front of Rob's face. And we know it was built, they were taking the ectoplasm from his face and from that area, because he used to finish up with almost like a blood mark, a bruise on his face. And the guides did explain to us that it was when there was a slight reluctance at doing something, that they weren't able to take the energy completely easily, and this would happen. But it'll fade, and it did after a day or so. That had faded until the next week, and then it was back again. But after a while, it stopped completely. So that was really quite good. But Liberace was one that we would often see, his beautiful beaming face, and with the clairvoyance that Barbara and I would often see his sequin jacket, a tuxedo. We had Frank Sinatra. We saw John Denver and Buddy Holly. We saw John Le Mesurier. Very distinct faces. And some of them would speak briefly. Laurel and Hardy were two wonderful, wonderful ones that are coming. There. This is Rob McLernan. And these are some of the faces that we saw so clearly. Imagine Rob's face changing into a narrower face. Something like Stan and Ollie. And not only did we get the face that shape, but they would also do mannerisms. So Ollie would wriggle his fingers, as much as say, it is me, yes, I am. And Stan raising his eyebrows. Maurice Barbanel, when he came, well, Tom knew Barbie really well. And when he came and was speaking to Tom, he actually put his glasses on. He had his glasses on when his transfiguration came. And Tom commented on it, because just to see him, he was one of the guides that worked with Rob and Barbara in their home circle, in their healing circles, was Sylvia Barbanel, Maurice's wife. So they'd known Sylvia without knowing who she was, just that she was Sylvia and that she worked with the children that were around them. So she brought her husband one night, and of course, with Tom being there, he'd known Barbie very well back in the 60s, when he was at the college, Arthur Findlay College, because Tom, of course, was the manager there. One other one that did come through, because after Ray Smith, this one in the bottom corner here, that was a picture I took of him in his flat overlooking Gibraltar, overlooking the Rock. He actually came through 9 days after he'd passed. And Tom and I were able to recognize him. In fact, when we looked, I said, "Tom, look." And Tom said, "It's Ray, Ray." And so Ray said, "Yes." And we said, "Oh, it's wonderful to see you." And he spoke just very shortly. And then we said, shall we send it to the family? Can we tell the family? He said, "Yes, please." And when we sent the recording to them of him speaking, they said, absolutely, absolutely. And the way he had said, yes, please, sealed the recognition of the tape. Yes, as I say, this is Rob McClelland, our medium in Spain. We sat with them for 7 years. And of course, at the bottom here corner, I was just saying about Ray Smith, the medium from Gibraltar, who came through just 9 days after he'd passed. And Tom and I were able to recognize him very clearly and been able to tell the family that he'd been through. But you can see some of the other delightful people. Maurice Barbanel, Alec Harris came through as well, and particularly Barbara recognized the face facing towards her, and she hadn't seen at that stage, she hadn't seen this picture of him, which was Bradley's, his son's favorite picture that we were able to use on the cover, but it's not anything like the studio portrait that is usually seen of Alec Harris. Robert Morley, Frankie Howard, John Le Mesurier, Buddy Holly, John Denver, and of course our friend Archie Liberace, Winston Churchill, and Oliver Hardy and Stan Laurel. Those are just some of the ones that we were able to recognise and speak to. Sometimes they didn't talk for long, others spoke for quite some time, others came back again. And it was just such a different set of experiences from what we'd had with Stuart and with David Thompson. But this materialisation with David Thompson and with Stuart when Tom came back in 2010. But I'm going to stop there. And if you want to know more, and also all the fun we had with the table in Spain as well, table movement, you'll have to buy the book. Yes, just 17 hours after, because as soon as Tom had passed, I rang Rob in Spain, because Rob had been sending healing and knew the passing, and we were very close with Robert, and so I rang him and said, this has happened, and he said, and he said, he'll be back. He'll be back. It may not be tomorrow, but he'll be back. Well, because that was his Saturday evening that he passed. On the Sunday morning, when they had the service in Spain, he came. He was back through a medium. Now, why Robert said he wouldn't be back probably on the Sunday was because it was a medium that Tom didn't particularly care for. He thought she was very psychic, and she wasn't very, she was a bit abrupt at times as well when she gave messages. And he wasn't very close, but yes, he did. He didn't actually speak, but his presence was known, and Pat was able to describe him and describe the man's bearing, his likes, his dislikes, his how he would good at speaking, a very spiritual man. And then just as she was leaving, she said, and just as I'm going, Agnes has popped in. Tom's aunt and Ag always used a phrase saying, I've just popped in to let you know. And that was her catchphrase, I've just popped in. And when Pat said that, that absolutely sealed everything else that had been said. So that was the first time. And then a week later, he actually came through at Stuart Alexander's seminar, the weekend seminar. He came through and gave tremendous evidence to Gilly Wolfson. And she, not only that, but she saw him clairvoyantly, but she didn't see him as an elderly man. She saw him as quite a young man. And this is what threw her. She didn't realize who it was, but she had all this information. And then the following morning, I actually had to do Tom's talk. Just 1 week after he passed, I had to do the talk that he was supposed to be doing about his mother's mediumship. And when I put the slides on the screen, she recognized the man she had seen, because the photograph that was shown of him in the circle when he was age 30 was as she had seen him clairvoyantly the day before. So, I mean, there was absolutely no doubt that this, and all the evidence that she had from him was just amazing as well. But it was another 10 months before he materialized, although he came through many other people, and that led to me writing this book called Harrison Connections. Oh, can't get the right way. Harrison Connections. And he actually chose the title. He told me through a friend who lived locally. She's actually moved away now, but a friend who lived locally, that was the title that he wanted for his book. It took me 4 years to write, because he kept saying, there's more to come, there's more to come. But he did actually, in the August, after he passed in the October, in the August, he came through David Thompson at our centre in Spain, where Rob and Barbara's centre, the Acacia Centre. And David was over for a week, and he actually materialised that evening, one of the, because he did 3 sessions, but that was just the first one. And yes, and we could hear him walking, but he walked, because of his condition with Parkinson's. He was 92, but he had got down to a shuffle. And so the shuffling feet across the floor was Tom's movement. And he actually came. And he came, and I spoke to him, encouraging to me. And he came to me, and he held my face between his hands, and he kissed my forehead. Now, Tom's hands were long and narrow and quite bony, and there was absolutely no mistaking those hands. I mean, David Thompson, you know, he's not tall. He's got quite small hands. And certainly it couldn't have been him, but that was it. And he spoke to me. His voice was full of emotion and not very strong. And everybody, when I said, oh gosh, oh, he's kissed me, and everybody heard it. And Robin Foy, who was sitting across the room and next to Robert, said something, and Tom heard it, and he said, Robin, lad. And as he turned and walked away across the room, the movement was better, the voice was stronger, the voice was definitely Tom's voice. And so much so that one lady from Switzerland, who was there that week, said, when I said, well, I wasn't sure because his voice wasn't quite Tom. She goes, oh, it was. I've watched that video 5 times. I know it was Tom. Well, what better proof you have? And then, of course, he went and spoke to Robin, who he'd known for many years, and to Robert, who addressed him as son. He always called Robert son. And yeah, so that was the first one. And then just a month later, he came through at Stewart's. And again, this time he actually took, having played with my hair, tickled my top of my head, he moved his hand down my shoulder, picked up my hand, and as he held my hand, he was overcome with emotion, and he couldn't hold the form, because for holding materialized ectoplasmic form is very, very difficult. You've got to give it all your energy until you're very expert at it. And this was only Tom's second time. And he said, oh, and with that he'd gone. But my hand, which was out in midair, having been held, was suddenly grasped by another very big hand. Walter. he said he did not like being in ectoplasm. He did much prefer just speak through Stuart. But that evening, we must have had 3 forms out in the room. Now, when Tom released the ectoplasm back, when he couldn't hold the form any longer, it went back into the cabinet. And we heard him start to build again. And June just said to him, June, who was sitting next to Stuart, said, Tom, don't try and walk, just speak. And he stood just out of the cabinet in front of Carol, who was sitting the other side of Stuart. And you could feel the energy standing there, because this is something that even though you can't see them, you can feel that energy right in front of them, right in front of you, that there's a body there that if you're trained enough sufficiently and aware, you can sense when somebody approaches you. And this is what happens with materialization. You can feel them close to you. And he did. He then spoke to us for about 5 minutes. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful evenings. Wonderful memories. Yes, well, that was Collins. I don't know of it coming through Stuart at all, but the only time I sat with Colin was Dolly actually came, and we're at Cardiff, and we were sitting, it was one of the Noah's Ark events, and we were sitting in the ballroom, and I was right at the opposite end, and this voice came down to me and said, I'm coming to you, dear. Your grandmother says you couldn't make butterfly buns, and you still can't. And she was so right, because I could, as a child, I used to buy the packets of cake mix and make my grandmother some buns to take to her on a Sunday, because I then had to take her to the chapel in her wheelchair. And I never knew which way up, when he cut the top off, I never knew which way up to put the bits to make the wings. I still don't. I still get them wrong. But yes, but that's the only time I've heard Dolly and know it. But I can't think of a flamboyant one with Stuart. No, we didn't travel any of that, because we were usually far too busy doing talks. But often we had to miss sitting with Stuart because we'd be away either up in the northeast or down in the southwest, or even in Wales. A couple of times we did 4 or 5 in the valleys, going to different churches. We'd be away for 2 weeks at a time. But yes, so no, I mean, the only time now when we sit with Stuart is when he did his seminars at Cober Hill. And he stopped doing those a few years ago, although we had a social weekend last summer. Yes, I've been very, very fortunate. But as Walter said, remember this for the future, remember this. So I think it was planned long before that this was supposed to be my work, that I could tell everybody. And I've just been in the right place at the right time to have so many wonderful experiences. When they start to withdraw the ectoplasm, very often it will sound like different things. Now, we had a joke. It sounded actually like bubble bath. People used to say it's like bubble bath, and I said no, it's crinkly cellophane. And I've actually not got the piece of cellophane out, because the wrappers from the After 8 box is absolutely duplicated. But it's sound when it's coming from a medium, from the mouth area particularly. Other times you may just hear a slight blowing sound, but you won't necessarily, but you can feel it. You can feel the energy in front of you, when particularly when sunrise, Tom's Mum's Guide builds. And he did this with David Thompson, because after Tom had been, sunrise then came, and as David's child guide said, I daren't stop him. This great big Indian wants to come. And he came and he could feel the energy, about 6, 7 feet tall, it felt like it, of Sunrise standing in front of me. And he spoke to me and he said, greets me as little sister. And just to feel that in front of you, it's not like a form of electricity, it's just a presence. But yes, but I have heard the sound of ectoplasm being withdrawn from a medium. Yeah, Tom filmed it, but I haven't been able to show it at all. And I've managed to get it from the camera onto a video, then onto a DVD. But only just recently, I've managed to get a program so I could get it back and get it onto the computer. And I had to wait for permission as well. And having been able to make contact with Angela, she's given us permission to it and to use it and say it, and to use their names as well. So it's something rather special. They're photographs I've taken out of, got from the internet and from books and things to be able to show what they looked like. But we were able to recognize them because they were so like those photographs. And I've chosen the best photographs that I could that resembled them. I mean, particularly with Archie. I mean, he used to come frequently and have a talk. In fact, one night, we sat in the morning actually in Spain, and one morning he came and he spoke, and Tom asked him a question, and he spoke for 8 minutes. So solidly, but we were able to see the transfiguration face while he was speaking. So to hold it like that was quite amazing. Walter did quite early on, because Michael, Stuart's brother, asked him this question about what do you do? And they said, well, we have to think what we look like to be able to produce it. And so then the question came up, well, if you thought you were somebody else and you pictured that face, he said, yes, you would come through as somebody else. So you really have to trust who you're working with and, whether they come or not. But yes, but the physical body was blind, but not the spirit body. And I have hopefully when I go, my niece is going to take on the business, but otherwise the books, of course, are always preserved in the national libraries. So I don't know which country you're in, but here in the UK, we have to, by law, send a copy to the British Library, which is in Yorkshire, and then we also send 5 copies up to the Agency for the Libraries in Edinburgh, and they send one to Dublin, to Belfast, to Cambridge, to Oxford, and keep one in Edinburgh. So the main ones. So they always have them stored in their libraries. So yes, some of the pictures are in, and particularly in this book, I have been able to put those pictures in, but I don't know about the movie. Hopefully, if I could get it out onto YouTube at some point. Yes, I don't know about Arthur Findlay College, but I think probably because there are very few people who actually do it in public. This is why with Stuart Alexander, the main thing, he does it with controlled groups now. So it's not like a full one. Same with David. I mean, we had about 30 people. That's the most that they wanted. With Stuart, in actual fact, we've sat with up to 90 at Cober Hill. But again, everybody is recommended or is known before they go and sit, so that you don't have troublemakers. Sometimes 1 or 2 have got in and things have not happened. Very, very little has happened that evening, because they're very, very spirit are very aware of what happens. And in fact, the case in point is the one at Alec Harris. his wife was warned not to have the final seance. And her friend persuaded, oh, they've waited so long, we've got to go ahead with it. And of course, that's when he was badly injured, and it affected his heart, which caused his death eventually. But that was because of somebody got in who had passed the ticket on. Somebody who was trusted had passed the ticket on to somebody else. And he was in league with the photographers and opened the curtains, opened the blinds, and the light flooded in, which of course made the ectoplasm rush back into Alec's body, which caused the terrible damage to his heart. So this is why people are so very careful. But a lot of people, and as Tom has always said with his mother's mediumship was only within the home circle. And although they had visitors about once a month, it was mainly just the same people sitting. And this is why they were able to do such wonderful things. It's the same with Stuart. The best things happen in the closed circle, in the home circle. This is when we went to sit. They said, well, Tom just brings such a huge amount of energy when he sits. This is why you are sitting with us. I was reading it again this afternoon, that this is the reason they wanted her to go and sit, because of Tom's energy. And we helped the Pontefract Circle developed because of Tom's energy. He could have been a very powerful medium, but he just was the power giver. He had the power source, and he gave all his energy. In fact, when we're in Spain, usually he just sat back, eyes closed, and just let them take the energy. The time that he saw Maurice Barbanel was one morning. I had to actually wait, sort of get him to open his eyes and come back to us, because I said, Tom, Barbie wants to speak to you. And, oh, yes, because he'd just been giving all his energy. That was Tom's contribution to what wonderful things that he'd had happen.
I'm sure you're aware that there are a lot of home circles all over the world.
Yes.
Which will never go public. But, and in fact, what we're hearing from the spirit world is that they want mediumship to go back into the home circles.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying desperately to develop home circles because they said in the future they're going to be needed.
Yes.
They are, they're talking about the fact that there will be mass passings, and the home circles are going to be needed, as they were during the First and Second World Wars.
Mm.
Of course, as people may not know this, that physical mediumship flourished during the American Civil War, during the First World War and the Second World War, because it was needed. There were so many people grieving and needed consolation at that time.
Yeah.
Now, what I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you have noticed that really help a home circle? Or what advice would you give to people who are trying to start a home circle today?
You need immense patience, harmony between the sitters. You don't have to be family. In fact, very often it's better just having friends than family, because sometimes you don't get on with your family. Stuart's was an exception, because his sister and his brother sat with him, and they sat for a long time before other people came in. But the main thing is to have a constant set of people who are devoted and dedicated and not wanting anything for themselves. Because very often you sit and nothing happens. The fact that we were able to walk into that one at Pontefract, where Janet had been brought on with her mediumship by Walter Stinson and the team in Hull, had helped to bring her on. So she was then able to, and when we had to make an apology for them not being able to to be there because Peter had to work and Janet was, and he said, no, this is what we always intended. No need to apologise for them. This is what we always intended. And that was the transition from them sitting with Stuart to having their own circle. But we then linked between the two. And when we moved to Spain, yes, we got Robert's circle going because he hadn't had a circle. But we sat with them, and sometimes it was just the four of us, sometimes there were one or two others. He no longer sits now because we tried sitting after Tom went. We sat for a number of times. We had different people coming in, and they would stay and they would go, and so we did still have Transfiguration, and we still did do a lot of good work. But he wanted to do more of his healing, and so in the end, the circle. In fact, he went into helping others develop the trance. He had a trance circle where other people were sitting and, sitting for their development. And but then eventually it finished, and he just said, no, I just want to do my healing. And because he's a Bowen, he does Bowen technique as well, but he does a lot of healing, and that's his main aim now. But it is just harmony, patience, and just keep going. Sometimes you don't even know who's going to be the medium. I mean, Stuart, they thought it was going to be Michael, his brother. And it was only when Stuart started to speak one night that they realised that Stuart was going to be the medium.
For the record, how long did Stuart Alexander sit before he started getting physical phenomena?
Well over 20 years.
So that circle was sitting for 20 years before it developed. I mean, that's patience, isn't it?
Yeah. We see Tom's mum and the circle, they sat for 7 years. Well,
Every week?
Every Saturday, they would get together for a social evening. It wasn't a circle. They just went round because it was wartime, 1940 to 1946. It was wartime, and Tom was away in the army. And when he married early in 1940, his wife, his mother and father went round to Sydney and Gladys Shipman's, and they had a social evening. And when Tom was home on leave, he would join them. They would chat, they would sing. Gladys would play the piano, Sydney would play his violin, and they would have a lovely evening together in this one room, the living room at Sid and Gladys's house. And when Tom came back from the army in 1946, they went round on a Saturday evening, had a lovely social evening, and after about 3 weeks of this, Sydney said, why don't we have a circle? Min's a trans, we'll have a trans circle because Min's already a trans medium. She had been a trans medium since she was a teenager. And that's 7 years had built the energy in that one room, ready for them to get going. There was harmony between the 5 of them and between 6 of them when Tom joined as well. And of course, Tom, with the power that he had, it just took off. Within 3 weeks, they had the first apport, and then voices through a trumpet, and it took off. And in 32 weeks, they had full materialization. But it was 6 solid years of sitting, enjoying themselves. No, but he already had a trance medium. I know a moment of a circle that is sitting. They were hoping to get physical, but they haven't. But now they're just doing trance. And the trance circle has been told by one of their main guides to get out and use the technology. And so they are now out on YouTube and on Facebook every Tuesday, and it's called the Blue Circle. And anybody can join. You can just put in the Blue Circle, and it'll come up, and you can then apply and join in, and then you can sit, and you sit at home in in the darkness or in dim light, and just listen to the voices that come through. And that it's like being in the circle, but your energy is also helping them at a distance. So you could be part of a home circle in that way. But I think they're getting quite a good bit. I keep forgetting Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. I forget when it's 8 o'clock. I forget when it's Tuesday. I've got to, be very, very disciplined at times where I say, "Oh no, I've missed it again. Oh gosh!" But you can listen to back recordings of it. But and they've got a lovely speaker. Monty is the main communicator. And I know who Monty is, and you probably do as well. But yes, but it's lovely. And they are just now doing what Spirit wants. So they are sitting at home with, I think there's 4 of them who just sit regularly. And now they said, right, will you use the technology to get our message out there? Because as Tom Communicator said, when we started to develop his trance, we're sitting in a trance group and in Spain. And after about 3 weeks, he said, "I'm not going to bother to come again because I'm speaking to the converted." And so that was it. They said, no, this communicator was the churchman, and he wasn't going to talk anymore because everybody was convinced of what he was saying anyway. So yes, but they are important, and that's what Tom said. Give me 100 home circles, and we can change the world. I think it was one point it got to be 100,000, but yes, but that was it. That is the main thing: is to sit in the home circle and not think about going out or doing anything. Just sitting for Spirit, and whatever you get is a bonus, because your energy, even if you're not getting anything, your energy is being used somewhere for something. And this is like the silent minute during the war, the silent army, the minute every night, just sending that energy out. They say that is what made the difference to the invasion.